All right, let's dive into this, the legend of Atlantis.
Okay.
It's a story that's captivated people for centuries.
Yeah, it has.
This idea of a lost city swallowed by the sea in a single night.
Hmm.
Now, you sent over this fascinating interview with historian and classicist Steve Kershaw, who literally wrote the book on Atlantis.
Yeah.
And he makes it pretty clear that we shouldn't be planning any scuba diving trips to find this city anytime soon.
Yeah, I think he's pretty adamant about that.
So if there's no giant city under the sea, what was Plato really getting at with this story?
Well, that's the real question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Plato describes this in detail in his works, Timaeus and Critias, and he wasn't trying to write, a historical account.
Right.
This wasn't like a travel brochure or anything.
Right.
He was using Atlantis as a philosophical tool, a way to explore bigger ideas about power, morality, and really the dangers of unchecked ambition.
So how does Atlantis fit into that? I mean, how does a story about a lost city teach us about these things?
Well, you have to think about the context, right?
Okay.
So Socrates and his friends,
Right.
they're designing this ideal state in Plato's writings. And to really test its strength, they need a worthy opponent, right? A formidable enemy.
Okay.
And that's where Atlantis comes in.
So Atlantis is almost like a stress test.
Exactly. A powerful, aggressive, imperialistic power that ultimately is defeated by the morally superior Athenians.
Who represent in Plato's ideal
Right. Exactly.
sort of this just society.
Exactly. So it's a cautionary tale. It's a warning about the dangers of reaching too far, too fast.
But why Atlantis?
Yeah.
Why this specific story? Why is it that we're still so drawn to it after all this time?
Well, you have to admit, it's a pretty compelling story.
Yeah.
Plato paints such a vivid picture, right?
Yeah.
You have these glittering gold buildings, advanced technology, complex social structure.
Yeah, it's easy to get swept up in that fantasy.
Exactly. And it speaks to our fascination with the unknown.
Right, with these lost worlds, these vanished civilizations.
Yeah, and the idea that there are still secrets out there waiting to be uncovered.
It's funny. Kershaw also talks about how when America was discovered,
Right.
some people actually tried to connect into Atlantis,
Uh-huh.
particularly when trying to explain the existence of advanced civilizations like the Aztecs.
Yeah, it's almost like they needed to fit it into this existing narrative,
Right.
instead of recognizing the achievements and accomplishments of these indigenous cultures on their own terms.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to be mindful of our own biases, I think, when looking back at history.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, okay, Atlantis, probably not a real place,
Probably not.
but were there any real-world events or places that Plato might draw an inspiration from?
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
Ancient Greece, earthquakes, volcanoes,
Tsunamis.
yeah, natural disasters were just a fact of life, right?
Yeah.
And Plato's audience would have been acutely aware of the power of nature to completely reshape their world.
And he even describes in the story this devastating flood that wipes out Atlantis.
Right.
Could that have been inspired by, I don't know, like a real event, like the destruction of Helike?
Yeah, it's a fascinating possibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
Helike was a coastal city that was destroyed by a tsunami during Plato's lifetime.
Wow.
And, it even had a temple dedicated to Poseidon, just like Atlantis.
Really?
Yeah. So Kershaw does acknowledge that events like this might have served as a kind of inspiration for Plato,
Yeah.
even if they weren't like a direct one-to-one reflection in the Atlantis story.
Right. So it's like he's taking these elements of reality and weaving them into this fictional narrative.
For exactly creating something that feels both believable and fantastical at the same time.
Well, Kershaw also brings up a really interesting comparison, I think, the Trojan War.
Oh.
Because we think the Trojan War probably had some basis in historical fact.
We do. We have archaeological evidence. It's connected to these other Greek myths and legends.
Right.
It's really woven into the fabric of Greek history.
But Atlantis
stands alone.
stands alone.
There's no corroborating evidence, no archaeological sites, nothing to suggest it existed outside of Plato's writing.
So that kind of leads us back to the idea that maybe Atlantis really was just this purely philosophical creation.
Yeah, the thought experiment.
A thought experiment designed to teach us something about ourselves.
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about it. Even if it's not a real place,
Yeah.
it can still spark our curiosity.
Right.
Challenge our assumptions and maybe make us think about the world in some new ways.
So even though there's probably not an actual Atlantis buried under the ocean somewhere,
Right.
the myth itself still has value.
Oh, absolutely. It's this reminder that the search for meaning, for understanding, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
I was thinking about that. All
Yeah.
the effort that people have put into searching for Atlantis over the centuries.
Right.
All these expeditions, books, theories.
Mm.
It's almost like the search itself became more important than actually finding anything.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It speaks to our, the power of ideas to
Yeah.
capture our imaginations and really drive us to explore, the unknown.
And in the case of Atlantis, maybe that journey has actually led to some other amazing discoveries.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. The pursuit of Atlantis has enriched our understanding of history,
Mhm.
archaeology, geology, even oceanography, right?
Yeah.
It's pushed us to develop new technologies
Yeah.
and explore parts of the world we might never have even considered otherwise.
And maybe that's even more valuable than finding, some mythical city at the bottom of the ocean.
I think it very well could be. I mean,
Yeah.
the search for knowledge, the thrill of discovery, expanding our understanding of the world, those are rewards in and of themselves.
Okay, so what do you think Plato would make of all this?
Oh, I think he'd be delighted.
Yeah.
I mean, remember, Plato was a philosopher,
Right.
a teacher. He used stories to explore these complex ideas and challenge conventional thinking.
Mhm.
And what better way to do that than with a story like Atlantis?
So what's the takeaway here for our listeners? What do we want them to remember from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the Atlantis story, while, likely a myth, can still be this powerful catalyst for exploration, for learning, for critical thinking.
So don't just dismiss it as a fairy tale.
Exactly. Use it as a springboard for your own explorations.
Mhm.
Read Plato's dialogues,
Okay.
learn about ancient Greece,
Yeah.
explore the ways that myths and legends still shape our understanding of the world.
And who knows?
Right.
Maybe you'll uncover your own piece of the Atlantis puzzle along the way.
Exactly. That's what we want.
So what resonates with you about the story of Atlantis? What really captures your imagination?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Share your insights on our social media.
Yes.
And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the world of ideas.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think about a story written, thousands of years ago, and we're still talking about it.
I know.
It's still relevant.
It really is.
It speaks to the power of myth, right?
It does.
These stories, even if they're not, literally true,
Right.
they still connect with us in this really powerful way.
They tap into something deeper.
Yeah.
Something that kind of transcends time and cultures.
Why do you think that is? What is it about Atlantis specifically that just keeps us coming back?
Well, I think there's a couple of things.
Okay.
On a very basic level.
Yeah.
It's just a great adventure story.
Mm-hmm.
It's got mystery.
It's exciting, intrigue. It's a lost world. It's a vanished civilization. It's a treasure waiting to be discovered.
It's the ultimate escape,
Yeah.
to imagine this world completely different from our own.
Exactly.
Maybe with advanced technology.
Right, and who knows, maybe even magical powers.
Right.
But I think there's something more to it than that.
Okay.
The Atlantis myth also kind of taps into some of our anxieties about our own civilization.
In what way?
Well, the idea that even the most advanced societies can collapse, that they can just be wiped out in an instant, that's a pretty scary thought, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a reminder of our own fragility.
Exactly.
And maybe even a warning to learn from the past.
Absolutely. And maybe that's why it continues to resonate so strongly today, even though, we have scientific evidence that suggests it's not a real place.
Right.
It still speaks to our fears, our hopes, our deepest questions about our place in the universe.
So even though the actual physical Atlantis might not exist,
Right.
the myth itself still holds value for us.
Absolutely. I mean, it encourages us to think critically,
Okay.
to question our assumptions, to be open to different perspectives. And it reminds us that the past is never really gone. It lives on in our stories, our myths,
Yeah.
and really our collective imagination.
And maybe that's the most important lesson here.
Perhaps it is.
So if we could just leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder on, what would it be?
I think it would be this. The next time you encounter a story, a myth, a legend
Mhm.
that grabs your attention,
Yeah.
don't just take it at face value.
Okay.
Dive in,
Hmm.
explore its origins, its interpretations,
Right.
its cultural significance. You
Yeah.
might be surprised at what you find.
You might even uncover your own piece of the Atlantis puzzle.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of ideas.
Yes, thank you.
Don't forget to share your thoughts with us on social media and be sure to subscribe for more fascinating explorations.
Yes, please do.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself.